Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch. Well, the New York Times had an interesting article, actually a fascinating article, on the moral damage that is done to soldiers who are participating in President Trump's boat killings, drug war killings, narco-terrorist killings in the Caribbean and in surrounding waters. What they're saying is that when soldiers are involved in carrying out a wrongful killing of another human being, that they end up suffering tremendous psychological damage. Like, I don't know if they mentioned the word guilt, but like guilt. I mean, this is what I've been saying for many, many years now. With respect to the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. The U.S. never had any legal authority or moral authority to invade either country. And therefore, all the killings that U.S. soldiers engaged in those two wars were wrongful killings. It's the wrongful killing of a human being. I mean, I would say most of the soldiers are Christians. I'm just guessing. At least a large percentage of them, they feel like they want to do the right thing. They join the military to protect America and so forth. And there is a sacred commandment that says, thou shalt not kill. And yet here there were massive numbers of people killed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, people may say, oh, well, Jacob, they suspected that Osama bin Laden was living in Afghanistan. And so? Terrorism is a federal criminal offense. That's why people are prosecuted in federal district court in Washington, New York, Virginia, and elsewhere. It's always been a federal criminal offense, at least when they started making it a criminal offense. And so the U.S. never had the authority to invade another country to apprehend a criminal suspect. I mean, that's what extradition laws are all about. That when two countries have an extradition treaty, then the country that is saying, well, there's a criminal in your country who committed a criminal offense over here, we want you to forcibly turn him over. Well, then they follow an extradition process where evidence is provided, sort of like a probable cause hearing, where the country that wants the person provides that evidence. And then the other country where the person is located says, okay, we find that there is this probable cause or whatever the standard is, and we're going to turn him over. If there is no extradition treaty, then there is absolutely no legal obligation for that country to turn over that person. And yet that's what happened here in Afghanistan. There was no extradition treaty, and President Bush simply said, you will turn him over because we're ordering you to turn him over. And the Afghan or Taliban regime said, no, that's not the way things work. We will talk, we will negotiate, we'll see about turning him over to an independent third country, instead of, to the CIA, where you guys are clearly going to torture him, probably even kill him. Let's turn him over to Switzerland or something like that, where we can have a real fair trial. And President Bush said, absolutely not. Do as we tell you, or we will invade. And so they said no, and that's what caused the invasion. That's not legal. There certainly was no declaration of war by Congress, which is what the U.S. Constitution requires. So under both international law and the law of the U.S. Constitution, these were illegal killings that these soldiers were carrying out. And Iraq is even worse because there was no allegation that they had any role at all with 9/11, much less that Osama bin Laden was hiding out there. This was a clear-cut war of aggression. And so soldiers were killing people there wrongfully too. I remember at the outset of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, there was an article about a Catholic soldier that was deeply troubled about the fact that he was being ordered to Iraq to kill people. And the article said, much to my surprise, that the chaplain there told him, oh no, you're able to in good conscience comply with your orders of the president. The president knows best. He knows what national security requires. Don't let your conscience be troubled. It was horrendous advice, horrendous. And presumably that soldier went and started killing people. And I remember, contacting a libertarian friend of mine who was a Catholic priest. And I said, what is the duty of a Catholic soldier here when they're sent into an area like this to kill or be killed? And his response was, that soldier cannot kill anybody. That the commandment is very clear. It doesn't say, thou shalt not kill unless you've been ordered to kill by your superior in the military. It says you shall not kill. And especially in a war of aggression. Now, we can all talk about a genuine self-defense war. I think people have a right of self-defense. But this was not self-defense. This was a war of aggression. The United States was the attacker. It was the invader. It was the aggressor. And he said that in that event, the American soldier cannot kill somebody. Even if that soldier is shooting at him. He's either got to run away or be killed. But he cannot be shooting back under the pretense that he's defending himself any more than a burglar inside a house can claim self-defense when the homeowner starts shooting at him. So when you see this high rate of suicides among American soldiers, which is soaring, continues to soar, it has long been my argument these are people that are suffering deep-seated guilt. How can you not feel guilty when you're a conscientious person, a Christian or Jew, Muslim, whatever, and you know you've killed wrongfully? And it's that guilt that I think most of these soldiers have never grappled with. When they go to a psychiatrist or a therapist to try to deal with their depression, the psychiatrist all too often is part of this whole statist mindset. Thank you for your service. The patient walks in. First thing I want to do is I want to thank you for your service. Well, that's not what that soldier needs. He doesn't need to be ratified in what he did over there. He needs to grapple with the guilt of what he did, the wrongfulness of what he did. It's only by grappling with that guilt, which he may not even recognize, that he can recover his sense of well-being. And so here this article is talking about that. These soldiers that are involved in these killings, and not just the ones that pull the trigger, like operating the drone that's firing the missile, but all of them that are providing the surveillance, that are all part of this thing, that they are likely suffering severe psychological damage, moral damage to themselves that they may deal with the rest of their lives. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see many of them committing suicide down the line. These are wrongful killings. It's not just the so-called second tap, which is horrendous. I mean, the fact that they blew this boat out of the water and there were 2 survivors is incredible. And they were hanging on to the boat. It had capsized. They're waving at the Americans, whatever, I guess it was a drone or something, or maybe a B-52 or whatever. And the admiral sits there and grapples with this, I think, for like 30 minutes or so. Now, he's fallen on the sword. He says, oh, no, I did this on my own. I'm not convinced that's correct. But the fact that he would order them to be killed is phenomenal. And to come up with all these silly arguments of, well, the cocaine might be still under the boat. The cocaine's a weapon. What do you mean a weapon? They're going to fire the cocaine at an American destroyer that's there? Or that, well, he could have been communicating with other boats in the area. And so, what, those other boats are going to come and attack the U.S. destroyers? You see, this is that military mindset. War, kill. Oh, these little boats are going to come and attack an American destroyer or an American carrier. This is, I mean, it is so shocking, but the national security establishment knows they're going to get away with it. I mean, all they got to do is send a message to this admiral, look, we'll pardon you, we'll pardon everybody involved, don't worry about it, nothing's going to happen to you. The Supreme Court's granted immunity to everybody in the national security establishment. No problem, just go ahead and do it. I mean, all they had to do was just send a destroyer up to the boat, to the 2 survivors, and say, are you willing to give up? And they would have said, of course they would have said yes. What are they going to do? Take a sidearm and start firing at the destroyer? I mean, It's just shocking to me that they even believe that Americans will fall for this, and some Americans do. They'll go with any excuse they come up with because the national security establishment is their god, and President Trump is their icon. Can do no wrong, and so they're not going to question anything this admiral says. But to me, it is so shocking. It shocks the conscience. The fact that they're killing these people in the first place, and they're continuing to do so. I think the number's gone over 90 now. These are innocent people in a moral sense. Oh, they're drug dealers? We don't know that for sure. They suspect them. They accuse them. But under our system of justice, everybody's innocent until they're proven guilty in a court of law. This is a criminal offense. And they're killing them. And what? For selling drugs? I mean, they're not initiating force against anybody. They didn't attack those destroyers. They didn't attack those drones. They didn't attack those B-52s. They didn't fire missiles at them. They're just selling drugs, assuming that the accusation is correct. That's a purely peaceful act. Now they say, oh, well, drug dealers are selling corrupted drugs. Well, that's because of their drug war. You see, they bring drug prohibition into effect, which brings the black market into effect, and the black market sellers end up selling corrupted drugs, which would not happen in a legal market. You'd be buying reputable drugs, credible drugs from pharmacies and other credible places. So they bring into existence the system, the black market system that produces the corrupted drugs. They're the ones responsible, but we don't know that those drugs on those boats, if they even were carrying drugs, remember, it's just an accusation. Doesn't mean anything. It's like a grand jury indictment. That's not evidence of anything. But we don't even know if they were carrying drugs, if they were carrying drugs, whether the drugs were corrupted or not. It's amazing to me that they're just getting away with killing these people. From a moral sense, look at the shock and outrage, for example, this massacre in Australia, and rightly so. These are just innocent people. Okay, the Israeli government's doing some bad things, but why take it out on those people over there in Australia, those Jewish people? But there's, outrage, and rightly so, but gosh, I don't get the same sense of outrage over the killing of these 90-some-odd people. Life is sacred across the board. The life of Jews in Australia are no more sacred than the lives of Latin Americans, Venezuelans, Colombians, whatever. And the notion that this is going to put a dent in the war on drugs, come on, does anybody really believe that? This thing's been going on for decades. They've knocked out drug kingpins, Pablo Escobar back in the 80s in Colombia and so forth. And killing these boat people? What's really going on here? Surely President Trump doesn't really believe that. And he goes and pardons that president of I forget which country, Honduras, that had gotten convicted of importing some 400 tons or something of cocaine. And he's there serving a, 30, 40-year sentence or something, which is ridiculous in and of itself because it doesn't do any good. It doesn't change anything. The drug war keeps going on and on. They've been busting these drug lords since I was a kid, growing up there along the border. And but he releases him, he pardons him, while at the same time killing these people running these little boats. There's something wrong with this picture, okay? And not to mention the fact that Venezuela, the fentanyl that they're complaining about is not coming from Venezuela. That's where the cocaine is coming from. What's really going on here? I think it's very clear this is a regime change operation, which is straight from out of the playbook of the national security establishment, the Pentagon, the CIA, and the NSA. In fact, I think they're really running the show. That's my opinion. I don't think Trump's making the call here. Remember, Trump ran on a position of no more foreign wars, drain the swamp. He was cascading the deep state. All that's gone. All that's just been thrown out. Why? Why would he change a fundamental position? There were even libertarians. They were supporting him on that ground. They were saying, Jacob, Donald Trump's a libertarian, Jacob, he's a libertarian. And I kept saying, that's nonsense. Do you know what a libertarian is? But they're saying, no, he's like anti-war. That's what they kept saying. He's anti-war. Jacob is anti-war. And so here he is. But there's a massive armada there. I think it's possible, and it's just an opinion, that it's the national security establishment that has told Trump, this is what we're going to do. You need to get on board as president. Because I think it's the only rational explanation for Trump's change of heart from his position when he was campaigning. You don't hear him talk about drain the swamp anymore. You don't talk about him beating the deep state. He's become part of the deep state with respect to this regime change operation. And I think that's what it's all about, is that they want regime change there in Venezuela. And they thought that with this massive armada, they would be able to intimidate Maduro into resigning. And I think they're still hoping that's going to be the case. In fact, when Maduro and Trump had a telephone conversation, Trump made it very clear, we want you gone. And when Maduro said, well, how about if I leave 2 or 3 years from now? No, you got to leave now. And I think that's what this was all about. But Trump, I think, might have been bluffing. I think he might have thought that Maduro would really leave, given this huge armada, and that he would be hailed as a hero by Maria Corina Machado and all the dissidents there, and he'd be proclaimed a hero, and he'd go into Venezuela, go into the parade downtown, freedom has arrived, the same sort of thing that we saw in Chile when the U.S. National Security Establishment, the CIA, the Pentagon, implemented a regime change operation there back in 1973 and gave the Chilean people General Augusto Pinochet, along with the reign of brutal terror and tyranny for the next, 17 years or something like that. But Maduro, so far, is standing fast. He ain't leaving. And so they're trying to figure out what to do. And I'm no military expert, but I don't think you can leave those ships out there indefinitely, just as to serve as an intimidation factor. So, and I think Trump is trying to decide, well, what do I do? Do I go drop bombs on the drug cartels where we have information that they're operating their manufacturing of their cocaine facilities or whatever? Or do I attack Maduro himself by trying to assassinate him with bombs or missiles and so forth? I think he's trying to figure that out. But in the meantime, there's another tack that they're now taking. Trump has now seized an oil tanker that was either headed to Venezuela or headed away from Venezuela. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, this is stealing things, stealing ships and oil on the high seas. Look, what they're saying is, oh, well, the ship's violating U.S. sanctions. Well, but what are sanctions? Sanctions are just an excuse to be able to punish foreign regimes for doing things that the U.S. doesn't want them to do. In other words, take the drug war. What business does the drug war, U.S. drug war, drug laws, have over there in Venezuela and the Caribbean? I mean, suppose Venezuela says it's our policy here to sell drugs. Well, we don't mind selling the drugs. Why don't they have that right? Okay, now the U.S. says, well, but the drugs are coming to the U.S. and American consumers are buying them willingly and eagerly. Okay, then stop them on American shores. But what gives you the authority, moral and legally, to go into a foreign country and say you have to obey our drug laws? You see, this is the mindset of an empire. It was the mindset of the Roman Empire, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire, that the whole world needs to comply with our edicts. And so it's the same with these sanctions. Well, we're going to put sanctions on Venezuela. Anybody that trades with Venezuela is going to be violating our laws. Really? On the high seas? What business does the U.S. have establishing a law that prohibits China from buying oil from Venezuela? Those are two separate and independent sovereign countries, but not into the imperial mindset. When you got an empire, you say the whole world has to comply. And so now they're resorting to high crimes. I mean, stealing a ship that is in international waters, has not entered U.S. waters. that is carrying oil from other countries that is now seized. And Trump says he's going to stick with their oil and they're going to continue doing it. Now, let me tell you what they're trying to do. They're trying to do what they did with the sanctions, the economic sanctions. You see, they keep saying that Maduro and his socialist system have brought economic chaos and crisis to Venezuela. And certainly that's true. We all know that as libertarians. Socialism is a bad philosophy. It impoverishes people. But by putting the sanctions on, it made things worse. It tightened the vice. They put the Venezuelan people in a vice, and then they start tightening the vice. Same thing what they've done in Cuba with the embargo and Cuba's socialist system. I mean, the Cuban people have been impoverished ever since. So would things be bad without sanctions? Of course. But it would not be anywhere near as bad without those sanctions. And so that caused, I think it was 8 million Venezuelans to flee, trying to save their lives, the lives of their children, their family. I mean, anybody would do that. And many of them ended up in South America and Central America, but many of them, as you know, refugees came to the United States where they were vilified, condemned, castigated, gang members, send them back, send them to El Salvador where they can be tortured and incarcerated for the rest of their lives. And oh my gosh, these are refugees that you yourself, Mr. Government, have caused with your sanctions. And the idea was, no, we're going to send them back to Venezuela. And why send them back to Venezuela? So they can die there. That's why they left in the first place. But they want them back there to die there because they figured that pressure of people dying will force Maduro to leave office. Sort of like it forced Fidel Castro to leave office. Well, a dictator is the last person in the world that's going to suffer the sanctions. It's the people that suffer. I mean, imagine if people a foreign regime put sanctions on the United States. Does anybody think, and there were Americans dying as a result. Let's say the whole world closed its doors and Americans could not escape, could not go to another country to survive, and there were Americans dying en masse. Does anybody think that Trump would say, well, I better resign to save the lives of these American people? Of course not. He'd say, we're not going to be intimidated. We're going to fight to the end, and no matter how many Americans have to die in the process. But now, seizing these ships is designed to do the same thing and even worse, to totally impoverish and starve to death the Venezuelan people. And if more refugees come, which they inevitably will, we can hear the same thing. I can hear it right now. They're invading them, Jacob. They're invaders. They're gang members. Oh, send them back. Deport them. Oh, this is horrible. When it's the U.S. seizure of these tankers, because Venezuela depends on this oil for survival. And so as people start dying there and fleeing to the United States, it's going to be because of the U.S. government that is causing these misery and all this death and destruction. Martin Luther King, I'm reminded of Martin Luther King when he said, this is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. He's talking about the U.S. government. And it wasn't just 1967. Yeah, I understand it's comforting to say, well, King was right at that time, Vietnam War and so forth. But Vietnam War's over and the U.S. is now a peace-loving nation. This is pure nonsense. Nothing changed fundamentally. When King said that, he was referring to the national security state, this totalitarian-like form of governmental structure that the U.S. adopted after World War II. The Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, to a certain extent, the FBI. That's the real core of the violence in this society. And notice that, remember I said this, or those of you that are familiar with my work know that when I said there's going to be, with these more killings of people in the Caribbean, which just follows this pattern of violence that Martin Luther King was talking about. I mean, I don't know how many millions the U.S. national security state has killed since the end of World War II, but it's got a number in the millions. Millions. That's nothing to scoff at. When it comes to being the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, we clearly are number one. And the fact that they're doing so more with these sanctions it boggles my mind. And so I said, and when these Caribbean killings start taking place, don't be surprised if we see more off-kilter killings, because those of you that are familiar with my work know that for many years now I've been saying that these off-kilter killings that are taking place in the U.S. are because they're copycat killers. That something in the U.S. killing machine is triggering the off-kilter people. That when things are normal, the off-kilter people are just kind of weird, but they leave people alone. But there's something that's triggering their killings, and now you have these killings at Brown University. Now, we don't know the motive yet, but I have no doubts that it's just another off-kilter killing. I mean, this guy that killed these 2 National Guard people in Washington, we don't know all the motives there or anything, but it sure appears to me just another off-kilter killing. This guy's from Afghanistan. You know, nobody's emphasizing the fact that he's a former CIA guy. That CIA hired him. So here's a guy, and then they bring him to the United States where he's expected to acclimate and be absorbed into the American culture and so forth. This is a guy that they induced to turn against his own country. He's a quisling in the eyes of his fellow countrymen. He can't go back to Afghanistan. He turned against his own country because the CIA induced him to do that. And then they bring him over here where it's very difficult to adjust. But that's the choice they gave him, that, oh, well, now that we've lost this 20-year war, we'll bring you over here. Or you can stay. That's your choice. Well, you know what would have happened to him if he had stayed. They'd have killed him brutally because he's CIA. I mean, it's the same as the choice they're giving these soldiers that participate in these killings. These members of Congress told these soldiers, you don't have to obey illegal orders. And Trump went ballistic and said, oh, this is sedition. They're the Pentagon. To show you the supremacy of the Pentagon, the Pentagon is still elevating its investigation of Senator Kelly for having signed that letter, that statement that said that soldiers don't need to obey unlawful orders. That shows you the supremacy of the Pentagon over Congress, that they can do this. Now, he's retired military, but the fact that they're investigating a member of Congress for telling soldiers that they don't have to obey illegal orders, to me, it says it all. I mean, we can see right there who runs this country, okay? Soldiers do not have to obey illegal orders. In fact, they should not obey illegal orders. But notice the choice that they're being given there in the Caribbean in these killings. They're given a moral choice that you can disobey these orders, in which case your career's over. I mean, if they don't prosecute them for disobeying orders, or they don't kill them for disobeying orders, every soldier there knows his career's over. That statement goes into his permanent record file. You know, when he gets to the point where promotions are discretionary, I think like from lieutenant colonel to full colonel, certainly to general, it's over. And every soldier that's there, or at least I'd say many U.S. soldiers, want to make the military their career. They've got a wife, they've got children, they've got a mortgage, they've got education to pay for their children, their food, other expenses, just like regular Americans. They want a good career. And they know that if they disobey these orders, their career's over. That's the choice they're being given. While the other choice is, go ahead and do something you know is wrong. Go ahead and participate in a killing that violates the 10 Commandments, that violates your creed as a Christian. That's horrible. That's absolutely horrible to put any person into that choice, choosing between family and God. I mean, that's what I call an evil system. Okay, I don't put the blame on President Trump or Admiral Bradley or any of, or Secretary of War Hegseth or any of them. I put it on an evil system. And that evil system is the national security state form of governmental structure that 20th century Americans adopted to fight the so-called Cold War, and this system of foreign interventionism. It's these systems that are evil that Americans need to confront. All right, I think that covers my sentiments on the national security state and foreign interventionism in Venezuela. You know, what we do here at FFF is we try to set forth the vision as to what we want in a society, what we want for our lives. Do we want this kind of life where it's filled with chaos and crisis and death and sufferings and killings? And I mean, notice there's just constant chaos, 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 not to mention the out of control federal spending and debt, which is getting worse and worse and worse. And now the Federal Reserve is now starting the process of inflation all over again with quantitative easing and lower interest rates, and to accommodate the debt. They got to pay off that debt. And so they're buying up that debt with newly printed money. This is no way to live. It's just no way to live, and it's not necessary. Our ancestors showed us that it's possible to achieve a society without all this chaos. That doesn't mean that you don't have problems in life. There's still divorces, there's marital problems, there's financial problems, there's illness, there's death, there's all kinds of things that go on in life. But you don't have the societal chaos that is produced with these evil systems that the U.S. has acquired. And so what we do here is we try to raise people's vision to what we need to do to achieve a better, freer, more peaceful, harmonious society. And one of those things is end this national security state that is the root cause of America being the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, as Martin Luther King pointed out, and this system of foreign interventionism. I'm Jacob Hornberger. This is Trump Watch. Thank you for tuning in, and y'all have a great Christmas.